everybody knows technical debt. So if you have a software company, technical debt is that you start with a beautiful, clean, efficient code base, and then you start to add features and build out the software. And then because you're essentially racing the clock because you need to deliver value to the market, a lot of that code base now starts to become inefficient over time. Fast forward 5 or 10 years, you have a, let's say, legacy framework that is just really, really hard to create new features on top of, because adding new functionality it's just the complexity just became so large. So any new functionality just requires a lot of development not to break something else. And then also a lot of your technical resources are going to be spent just maintaining or upkeeping the existing value, right? That is technical debt. Now, commercially, your customer contracts have exactly the same kinds of properties, right? So whenever you're starting out in a SaaS business, you have a few customers, and the deal structures, the contracts you have with them is pretty simple. So I'm selling this account for 100,000 a year and this account for 70,000 a year, and that's pretty easy, right? I send them an invoice every year and off I go. Now you add 10 more accounts, 100 more accounts, 2,000 more accounts, and so forth. And what happens is that, especially if you have a sales-driven motion, you start to tend to accrue different types of contracts or agreements with customers. So it's like, oh, all the legacy accounts are the ones that was closed on the pricing that we had back in the past. And then we did like the version 2 of the software. And then we closed all the new accounts back in 21 on these contracts. And then we had this particular channel partner, they did a lot of reselling over here, but then we bought them out, so we have all these contracts and so on. So that what happens when you usually hit around 10 million ARR in B2B SaaS, you tend to have a lot of legacy contracts. Like all your current accounts are closed on different formats, different pricing, different agreements, different terms, and so forth. And that creates what I call commercial debt. So we have the customer acquisition cost, so the cost of acquiring new revenue, and then we have the number of accounts, right? So the number of customers. And if your number of accounts is very low, you tend to also have low CAC, so it goes here. And then what happens is that dollar for dollar, you start to increase the CAC. So it actually becomes more expensive to sell the more accounts you have. For example, Salesforce spent something like $30 billion on sales last year, and they acquired something like 12 million of revenue. That is actually not that efficient, and they have about as much scale as you can wish for in SaaS. And that is because they have a lot of different products, and they have a lot of different enterprise accounts and other accounts that are closed on a variety of different contracts, which means that they have a lot of people running around managing the commercial debt for all these accounts. So don't be that. Another example, I had a late stage like Series BC startup that I advised a couple of years back, and they had about 600 enterprise accounts globally, and we knew, because we had done the work, that we could raise prices on average 85% for these 600 enterprise accounts. But we chose not to. Why? Because all 600 enterprise accounts were closed on different contracts, like literally way different contracts. Some of them were written up in the early days by the sales reps themselves on Word files, some of them not signed, some of them potentially signed but just on like local laptops that had been thrown out. So we didn't even have all the contracts. We just knew from the CRM system what to charge them every year, right? So we knew that if we had to like roll over all these enterprise contracts to a new pricing framework, we would have to literally renegotiate all 600 enterprise accounts. And we knew that it would take 1 or 2 years, in which time we could do nothing else. No new sales, no upselling or cross-selling of existing products to existing accounts. Just renewing existing accounts on a new framework in order to reduce the commercial debt. So this is a kind to, we have a lot of technical debt, and if we are to clean it up, then we have to do a massive 1 or 2 year project where we don't do any new features, we just do like internal housekeeping work. This is the equivalent, right? And they chose not to do it. They chose to just sell instead, because the founders just said, well, it's just too high risk. We would rather just sell to a large corporate trade buyer that we have. We get a pretty nice exit now. It's good. And then they can clean it up, because they would probably want to clean it up anyways because of their structure. So they ended up with a materially less good outcome compared to what they could have done if they had managed the commercial debt as they were growing. Because they went from like the first 5, 10, 20 enterprise accounts, you need to just create different models just to learn. But at some point you just need to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, we have one model now and we want to scale on this model. So this contract template, this pricing, these discounts, and nothing else. And then for the next 50 or 100 accounts, we're just going to do that and then nothing else. Because if you do that, you keep the commercial debt in check, you control it, so that at the end, whenever you do want to change your packaging or your pricing or your terms, you can just write one email to all your customers and say, hey, come January 1st, we have new pricing as we did last year, and then you get to monetize your solution way better, and you get to do it without having to do 100 individual renegotiations with 100 different accounts. So it is one of the things I see tripping up SaaS businesses, not in the early stages, right? It's sort of whenever you get to product market fit, people just do whatever it takes. And then they just start to they put the gas on, and then they just keep growing, and they grow past 5, 10 million, and around 15 million. If they don't have the commercial debt in check, they start to slow down. Because the cost of acquiring new accounts just keeps increasing, because they have to, essentially, it doesn't scale. All the account executives they have are just now farmers. They just have to spend time renewing existing contracts and maybe monetizing them slightly better instead of actually acquiring new business. So real growth from this point in time, high level growth, going past 15 million or so, if you have a lot of commercial debt, just becomes really, really hard. And especially if you just raised a large round and you have a lot of VCs banking on you doing like a 2-3x over the next year or so, it can just be one of the things that I see kill a lot of these companies that had a lot of previous success in their growth, but they didn't check for commercial debt. So it's one of the things that I suggest you take a look at and take a hard look at early. And if you ever, let's say, do some major work on your pricing and packaging, make this part of it. Make this part of it in the sense that whenever you're introducing new pricing, let's say, you might as well just clean up all the old legacy contracts and get everybody on a new contract so that you can later bulk handle people, all your accounts, instead of having to individually handle them. And you'll thank me later, because it's really one of the things that just makes it a lot easier and scalable to run a B2B SaaS solution. So it's a little bit sort of, I don't know. It isn't very concrete, but I hope that you understand what I mean with it. It's the equivalent of technical debt. It's helped me understand sort of what actually drives value long term in a lot of SaaS businesses, and I hope it's valuable to you too. Thank you.